How does a goalkeeper get rejected by every giant in his own country, leave home as a teenager with nothing but doubt, spend nearly a decade being passed around like luggage, and still come back to rewrite football history? How does a man go from warming benches across Europe to standing on the biggest stages, staring down the world's best players, and breaking them one penalty at a time? And how does that same man become football's most controversial villain, while also being crowned the best goalkeeper on the planet more times than Neuer or Courtois? This is not a fairy tale. This is survival, obsession, and revenge wrapped into one career. This is the origin story of Emiliano Martinez. Born in Argentina, Martinez never played a single professional game in his home country, rejected by River Plate, rejected by Boca Juniors, before Independiente finally took him in and sent him more than 150 miles away from his parents. A distance that hurt even more because his family could barely afford to visit once a year. And even then, nothing about his early development screamed future superstar. Until out of nowhere, he was called up to Argentina's Under-17 South American Championship, where after solid performances, he found himself in a final against Brazil, a penalty shootout, and calmly saved 3 spot kicks, including one from a young Felipe Coutinho. A moment so unexpected that even his teammates assumed defeat was inevitable, except there was one Arsenal scout in the stands. And when Independiente called Martinez afterward, he thought they were joking. So unreal that his only request during contract talks was that Arsenal buy his father a car. Arriving in England wide-eyed, amazed by basic training equipment like a ball launcher, believing the dream had already been achieved, only for reality to hit hard as he spent 9 brutal years bouncing between loans, 7 different clubs, just 56 total starts, watching teammates come and go, watching managers change, even seeing Mikel Arteta arrive as a player and eventually become his manager, while he remained invisible, a nobody, a backup's backup. But quitting was never an option because Martinez had made a promise to his mother at 18 that he would never return home as just another failed footballer. And that promise slowly turned into obsession, then anger, then belief, until Arsenal recalled him in 2019 as their 4th choice goalkeeper. A move nobody cared about, but one that changed everything, because from that moment on, Martinez decided he would never be overlooked again, embracing every psychological edge, every dark art, every moment of pressure. And when his chance finally came, he didn't just take it, he owned it, turning doubt into dominance, chaos into confidence, and rejection into fuel. A journey that would soon carry him from forgotten loanee to World Cup hero, from benchwarmer to Ballon d'Or level recognition, and from nobody to football's most feared man in goal. And if you're enjoying this story so far, pause for a second, hit subscribe because stories like this don't get told often enough, and comment below which players rise from obscurity you want next. Because legends aren't born, they're forged. That FA Cup final against Chelsea ended up becoming the moment everything finally tilted in his favor. Because with one more towering performance under the Wembley lights, the so-called ugly duckling of Arsenal's squad dragged the club to their first and still only a major trophy of the post-Wenger era. And when Emmy stepped up for the post-match interview, barely able to get his words out, fighting back tears, it wasn't just emotion, it was validation. Because in a matter of weeks, his market value had exploded from barely 3 million to over 12. Proving Ian Wright right in real time. And before preseason even finished, the message was no longer subtle. It was an ultimatum. He would not stop until he was number 1. And if that future wasn't at Arsenal, then he would walk. And you could already see the shift in his personality as they beat Liverpool on penalties in the Community Shield, with Emmy openly taunting Van Dijk, asking if he was really sure he wanted to go first. Leaning fully into the psychological edge he'd discovered, but Arsenal hesitated, faced with matching Leno's wages while still unsure who their real number 1 should be, and so they cashed in, letting Emmy leave for Aston Villa for £20 million, sending him at 28 years old into the first full starting season of his entire career. And it was into a club desperate for stability, one that had burned through 8 goalkeepers in 5 seasons, yet had just doubled down on ambition by locking down Jack Grealish, and breaking their transfer record for Ollie Watkins, meaning all the pressure landed squarely on Emi's shoulders, and instantly, on debut, he saved a penalty to secure 3 points, setting the tone. Because within months he wasn't just trusted, he was adored, ranking among the league's elite for shot stopping, commanding his box like a veteran, dragging Villa to their best finish in a decade, breaking Brad Friedel's long-standing clean sheet record, and walking away with the club's Player of the Season award, calmly brushing off the growing attention by saying people remember how the movie ends, not how it begins. And the ending was still coming, especially because that same story was now unfolding on the international stage, where Argentina, stacked with legends, captained by Lionel Messi himself, had gone nearly 3 decades without lifting a trophy, repeatedly collapsing in penalty shootouts, until Emi Martinez arrived. And then came that Copa America summer, the semifinal against Colombia, 120 brutal minutes, 1 goal apiece, penalties looming. And that was when the world met the real Emiliano Martinez, a goalkeeper who understood the rules well enough to bend them, who knew you could be booked in a shootout but never actually sent off, and weaponized it completely, turning the moment into pure psychological warfare, stalking the line, staring down shooters, whispering threats, telling Yerry Mina he already knew he was scared before diving to stop his penalty, doing the same to Davinson Sanchez and Cardona, dismantling Colombia piece by piece and dragging Argentina into the final, where one more composed display and a Di Maria goal finally ended the drought. South American champions at last after 28 years, with Messi openly admitting how difficult it had been and how decisive Emi was. And overnight, Martinez transformed from a late bloomer curiosity into one of the most recognizable goalkeepers on earth. While back in England, Bernd Leno faded into the background, slowly replaced by Aaron Ramsdale. And Emi wasted no time bringing those same ruthless mind games to the Premier League, baiting Bruno Fernandes into blasting a penalty over the bar, proving that this wasn't a phase or a gimmick, it was a mindset, even if Villa's season itself didn't grab headlines. Because by now, it was clear, after a decade of rejection, loans, benches, and anonymity, Emiliano Martinez had finally arrived, not quietly, not politely, but as football's most unapologetic villain. From the very start, nothing came easy, because in that first full season after arriving at Arsenal, Emi Martinez barely even existed, allowed to sit on the bench just twice before being rushed out on an emergency loan to 4th-tier Oxford United, a move that lasted exactly 1 match before they lost and missed the playoffs. And if that felt cruel, the following season somehow found a way to be worse. Because even when Wojciech Szczęsny and Łukasz Fabianski both went down injured, Martinez still couldn't break through. Benched in favor of Vito Mannone, a collapse so brutal that it took 389 days before Emi stepped onto the pitch again. And even then, it was desperation. Another emergency loan, this time to Sheffield Wednesday. And although that stint went just well enough to convince Arsenal to keep him as third choice the next year, fate repeated itself as injuries once again forced him into the spotlight for 5 straight matches, including a clean sheet against Dortmund that earned him praise as faultless, a place in UEFA's Team of the Week, and even a quiet promise from Arsene Wenger himself that Emi was the future of the club. A promise that dissolved instantly when he conceded 3 against Stoke City, prompting angry fans to confront Wenger on the train back to London, and just like that, Martinez was shipped out again, this time to Rotherham United, a club so deep in relegation trouble that their manager promised to wear beach shorts and a sombrero if they survived. A joke that turned real as Emi dragged them through the final 6 matches, losing only once and inspiring his coach to claim the world would soon see him on Match of the Day. Yet football had other plans, because shortly after, Peter Cech arrived from Chelsea, instantly locking the number 1 spot for years. And although training beside a legend should have been inspiring, it effectively froze Emi's career. Especially after another loan to Wolves ended in injury, followed by a brief Premier League appearance after 870 days of waiting, then a failed stint at Getafe where 7 matches were all he could manage. And by the time Wenger retired and Unai Emery arrived, Martinez had become invisible. So much so that despite Szczęsny and Ospina leaving, Emery chose to spend a club record fee on Bernd Leno, making it painfully clear that Emmy was never part of the plan. And although some romanticized his final loan at Reading as a turning point, the truth was harsher, because Leno was outstanding, rivaling Aubameyang for Player of the Season. And Emmy knew that at 27, after a decade at Arsenal with barely any games and earning 4 times less than the new keeper, he either forced change or disappeared forever.